This video is kindly sponsored by Keeps. More on them later on. Hey, 42 here. Scotland's a funny old place, isn't it? A land where the C word is used as a term of endearment. Where an offal-filled sack made of sheep's stomach is considered a great delicacy. And where the national animal doesn't even exist. Those who venture north of the Wall, Hadrian's Wall, that is, will find themselves in a land of crumbling castles, mist-shrouded valleys and murky lochs, where large shapes shift beneath the surface of the inky waters. What they might also find if they were to make a small detour to the village of Milton, just outside of Dumbarton, is a mysterious Gothic bridge where dogs keep trying to kill themselves for reasons that nobody can explain. Owners describe their dogs freezing on the spot midway across this particular bridge, before apparently being possessed by some kind of strange energy which compels them to leap to their deaths. That may sound quite hard to believe, but this isn't just some Scottish fairy tale born out of boredom and too much single malt whiskey. The strange goings-on at Overtoun Bridge are a matter of public record. Mysterious doggy suicides have been reported there since the 1950s, and the story has featured in major news outlets including The Independent and the New York Times. So, just what the hell is going on here? I'd like to take a quick minute to talk about hair loss, because I've had people close to me start to lose their hair as early as their 20s, and it's always been an upsetting experience. So, if you're in the same boat, then you're not alone. Did you know 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35? But the best thing you can do to prevent hair loss is take the initiative now and do something about it whilst you've still got hair left. I like Keeps because it makes treatment super easy by delivering your hair loss medication every 3 months, so you can say goodbye to awkward doctor visits and waiting in pharmacy checkout lines. There's a reason that Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors, and hundreds of thousands of men trust them for their hair loss prevention medication. If you're like me, you're probably not ready to lose your hair just yet. But prevention is key. The faster you act, the faster you'll see results. And the sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you'll save. So, if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/42 or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. Built in 1862 by wealthy lawyer and businessman James White, Overtoun House is a grand old place. You might actually have already heard of it, or at least already seen it. It was used in the filming of Cloud Atlas, a film based on the book of the same name by British author David Mitchell. The bridge was a later addition, built in 1895 to connect the original estate with a newly acquired patch of land on the other side of a gully carved out by the Overtoun Bridge. To the untrained eye, Overtoun Bridge looks pretty normal. Actually, it looks pretty normal to the trained eye too. But clearly, our canine friends are seeing something we aren't. Because, according to some sources, as many as 600 dogs have inexplicably jumped off Overtoun Bridge over the last 70 years or so, leading to at least 50 doggy fatalities and a small army of traumatized owners. The question is, why do they jump? Considering what I've just told you, you won't be surprised to learn that Overtoun Bridge has earned itself the highly creative nickname of Dog Suicide Bridge. But are these dogs really deliberately trying to end their own lives? The short answer is probably not. Scientists aren't actually sure if it's even possible for animals to commit suicide. Plenty of species exhibit self-destructive behavior. Malaysian worker ants literally blow themselves up when their colony comes under threat. Honeybees die when they use their sting on any animal with relatively thick skin. And there are plenty of stories of dogs starving themselves to death after their owners die. But whilst all those examples may sound quite a lot like suicide, There's one key aspect of each that's rather difficult to assess: intent. When a Malaysian worker ant goes nuclear in the general direction of its foes, it's probably acting on a base instinct, rather than some kind of utilitarian belief in nobly sacrificing itself for the greater good. And the same goes for honeybees and their stings. Even when it comes to higher animals, things are far from clear. Does the dog who stops eating when his owner dies know that doing so will result in its death? Or is not eating simply an instinctive reaction to extreme stress? Nobody knows for sure. And without the intent to die, seemingly suicidal behavior isn't actually suicide. At least not in a technical sense. The good news is, we probably don't have to worry too much about wrestling with the philosophical, scientific, and linguistic complexities of the Overtoun Bridge case. After all, it does seem quite unlikely that all the suicidal dogs in Britain just happen to live in and around the village of Milton in southwest Scotland. Not to mention the fact that if self-destruction really was the aim here, you'd think the dogs might have thought to choose a more suitable location. Overtoun Bridge is only about 15 meters high, and the majority of dogs survived the ordeal. But whatever the motive, the dogs are definitely jumping. So, if not suicide, what? This being Scotland, which I've already mentioned is a decidedly magical place by all accounts, plenty of people have considered, shall we say, unconventional explanations. Some claim Overtoun Bridge spans a so-called thin place, where different realities bleed into our own, something our canine companions apparently aren't big fans of. Others put the dog deaths down to mischievous spirits, usually the conveniently local White Lady of Overtoun, the ghost of a woman who lived alone in Overtoun House for 30 years after the death of her husband. The minor issue with both of these theories, of course, is that they're absolutely ridiculous. I mean, seriously, whatever your beliefs relating to all things supernatural, it seems a bit of a stretch that we have a mass-murdering, ghostly dog hater to blame for this mystery all along. One theory that briefly seemed promising was that some kind of ultrasonic sound, something only dogs could hear, was to blame. The UK's Trident nuclear-powered submarines are housed in the naval base at nearby Faslane Bay. And it was thought that perhaps this mysterious noise came from somewhere over in that direction. But acoustic experts have ruled this one out after extensive testing at the bridge. The truth is, to this day, nobody knows for sure what exactly is going on at Overtoun Bridge. The whole thing really is a genuine unsolved mystery. But there is one theory that does a pretty good job of explaining all the peculiarities of the case. Well, almost all of them, but I'll get to that in a minute. First, we need to examine a few important clues. Clue number 1. Overtoun Bridge spans a steep gorge and is surrounded with high vegetation on all sides. Clue number 2. Being part of a lovely country estate in Scotland, this area is teeming with local wildlife, including mice, squirrels, and most importantly, mink. Clue number 3. The walls that run the length of the bridge are made of solid stone, and the top sections taper ever so slightly down towards the drop below. So, any ideas? Well, if you figured this out already, then congratulations, you're basically the Jonathan Creek of the dog world. If not, then let me give you another clue. Have you ever seen one of those memes where some unexpected guy jumps into what looks to be a small puddle only to be buried over his head in a deep pool of muddy water? That sort of thing happens when our senses trick us into thinking one thing when the reality of the situation is very different. And it may be that, from a dog's perspective, Overtoun Bridge works a little bit like that. Because the key to this little mystery lies in the unique way that dogs perceive our world. As you're no doubt aware, dogs have a quite remarkable sense of smell. We humans have roughly 6 million olfactory receptors in our noses to help us smell the world around us. Dogs, on the other hand, have around 300 million. Not only that, but they dedicate around 40% more of their total brain power to processing smells than humans do. As a result, the average dog has a sense of smell that's up to 100,000 times more accurate than our own. When strolling across Overtoun Bridge, a human might notice a few faint, earthy scents wafting in from the nearby fields. But a dog making that same crossing would experience a veritable explosion of complex smells. The scents left behind by other dogs, food cooking up at Overtoun House, dust drifting down off the old stones of the bridge. But above all of that olfactory noise, to a dog, one smell would stick out above all others. The delicious, sweet, irresistible scent of mink piss. Because it turns out that dogs, for some reason, go absolutely bonkers for the stuff. Remember how I mentioned that multiple dog owners have described their canine companion suddenly stopping whilst crossing Overtoun Bridge before a malicious energy compels them to jump? That behaviour sounds undeniably creepy when viewed through the lens of dogs mysteriously killing themselves, but switch up the context and it's actually perfectly normal. Anyone who's ever owned a dog will be familiar with the sight of their beloved pet pausing briefly whilst out on a walk before suddenly pelting off into the undergrowth after some unseen animal or other. It may simply be that dogs crossing Overtoun Bridge are picking up on the scent of the nearby mink and bolting off to try and murder them. That might not sound like a particularly convincing explanation to begin with. Why don't the dogs just walk down into the gorge the old-fashioned way? But here's where Overtoun Bridge's unusual layout comes into play. As per clue number 3, the walls that run along the sides of the bridge are made from solid, unbroken stone. From a human perspective, that detail is essentially irrelevant. But for dogs, whose eyes are set much closer to the ground, it's crucial. In combination with all the high vegetation that surrounds the bridge on all sides, you're left with a kind of dog's eye view optical illusion that tricks passing canines into thinking they're walking alongside a regular wall with solid ground on the other side, rather than a precipitous 15-meter drop. The fact that the top of the wall is tapered slightly downwards is the final nail in the coffin, because it makes it that much harder for a dog jumping onto the wall to arrest its momentum when its eyes delivered the bad news that the ground is 15 meters further down than expected. It's a neat little theory that's made even more convincing by the fact that mink are thought to have first arrived in the area in the 1950s, right around the time the first doggy deaths were reported. There is one minor problem though. Think about it. There are thousands of bridges in Scotland, and God knows how many tens of thousands across the UK. So why is this only happening at Overtoun? Plenty of other bridges are lined with solid walls, and high vegetation isn't exactly uncommon in this green and pleasant land. Minks are admittedly non-native to these shores, having come here from fur farms in the US in the first half of the 20th century, but it's safe to say the invasion has been a resounding success, because as of today, you can find those smelly little buggers pretty much everywhere. Combine that with the fact that around a third of British households are home to at least one dog, and it becomes very hard to believe that the conditions at Overtoun Bridge aren't to be found anywhere else in the country. And yet, only at Overtoun Bridge are dogs leaping to their deaths in large numbers. Until someone can explain that little conundrum, it's hard to say for sure that the whole stinky mink optical illusion theory is accurate. Yeah, we probably need to come up with a better name for that. Okay, one final twist to this strange little tale before I leave you. And fair warning, this part is pretty unpleasant. You see, it turns out that it isn't only dogs that have fallen to their deaths from Overtoun Bridge. In 1994, a young father threw his infant son from the bridge after becoming convinced the child was the incarnation of the devil. Tragically, that fall proved fatal. To this day, plenty of people report feeling a strange sense of foreboding when crossing Overtoun Bridge. Not just tinfoil hat types either. Even a few skeptics have confessed to feeling a little uncomfortable there, for reasons they can't entirely explain. Is that the result of the bridge's sinister reputation getting to work on their subconscious minds? Or did I dismiss those unconventional theories a little too soon? I'll let you be the judge of that. Thanks for watching.